My grandfather was a pilot when he was young. As a survivor, he says something new about the Bermuda Triangle mystery. If you connect Miami, Bermuda Island, and Puerto Rico on a map with lines, you'd get a triangle, called the Bermuda Triangle, or the Devil's Triangle. It's been responsible for the disappearance of over 2,000 ships and 200 aircraft so far. On December 4, 1970, my grandfather, Bruce Gernon, was piloting a Beechcraft Bonanza A-36 from Andros Island in the Bahamas to Palm Beach, Florida. He was flying with his dad and his business partner when they got caught in the Bermuda Triangle, and it swallowed them whole. Let's hear about what he experienced, in his own words. We had a business trip that day. It was me, my dad, and a merchant who was a friend of my dad's. We were headed to Palm Beach, Florida for business. My dad didn't want to come at first. He said he wasn't feeling well and had a cold, but I insisted. I told him it was a golden opportunity for our business, and after some convincing, he finally agreed to come with us. That was a flight I used to do all the time without any problems, usually just an hour and a half. My dad said, "It's a bit windy today, isn't it, son?" I replied, "I've flown on days way windier than this." "But Dad, look at those beautiful clouds." My dad stayed quiet, just watching the sky and the clouds around us. We started gaining altitude, and by the time we reached 300 meters, strange things started happening. I saw a small cloud ahead of us. It was getting bigger and bigger, but it wasn't because we were getting closer. It was like the cloud itself was growing. I had no choice but to fly through it. So I did. Everything turned white and foggy as we entered the cloud. That's when my dad said, "I feel something's wrong, son. Why is this cloud so big and deep? Why doesn't it end?" We've been flying through it for so long. I looked at my friend, the merchant, and saw him chewing his nails. That's when I could hear my own heartbeat. I thought we were stuck in it. But then I finally saw a weak light and a patch of blue sky near the end of the cloud. I said, "It's over, Dad. It was just a cloud. Did you see? You're just too sensitive." And I laughed out loud. I pushed the altitude up to 3,500 meters, and then I saw another huge and incredible cloud ahead of us. My dad shouted, "What if you change direction? This one might be even bigger than the last. I'm really scared, son. I told you a million times I didn't want to come with you. I'm sick. Why'd you drag me into this mess?" "Dad, please be quiet. Don't you see what kind of situation we're in? I wanted to change direction, but I couldn't. I had no choice but to fly straight into this massive cloud. The cloud was so huge, and when the plane entered it, everything went pitch black, like we were in the middle of the night. I couldn't even see a sliver of sunlight. I thought maybe it was a rainstorm, but no, it wasn't. I yelled out because I honestly thought I was going to die. My dad and my friend were yelling too, and I couldn't control my tears because I just knew something was wrong. I started talking to God. I wish I was alone. I wish I hadn't brought my dad and my friend with me. Then, suddenly, I saw flashes of white lightning. They appeared and vanished just as quickly, exactly like lightning. But they weren't. The flashes were so bright they lit up everything around us. As an experienced pilot, I knew what lightning looked like. I had seen countless bolts before, but this wasn't it. The light was so intense it was starting to hurt my eyes. My dad and my friend were shielding their eyes with their hands, but I had to stay focused. I had no choice but to keep going. After a few minutes, I realized this was the same cloud I had passed through earlier when we were at 3,000 meters. But now it had turned into a massive cylinder. We were flying right through its center, and the cloud was over a kilometer wide. It seemed endless. I didn't say anything about what I was realizing. I was just focused on trying to control the plane. It was swerving left and right, out of my control, like some force or power had taken over the plane. And it wasn't me flying it. I felt so stressed, thinking that I'd never get out of this mess. Suddenly, all these memories flashed before my eyes: my first day of school, playing soccer with my friends, graduation day, my first kiss with Lisa, our wedding day, the birth of my son, and the joy and tears that came with it. All these moments from my whole life passed through my mind in just seconds. Even that moment earlier when my dad said he didn't want to come on this trip, and how I'd insisted, it all happened in a flash. My eyes were filled with tears when I saw a faint light ahead. It felt like a new life at the end of a tunnel. I gripped the controls of the plane tightly, trying to keep it from veering off course. I was heading straight for that light, thinking this nightmare was finally going to end. But then, things started getting even stranger. The walls of the cloud tunnel began to close in on us. The navigation systems went haywire. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like we were passing through the eye of a needle. The compass started spinning counterclockwise on its own. All the electronics had failed. It felt like the plane was being controlled by some unseen force or caught in a current. My dad shouted, "We're gonna die, Bruce. I think we're trapped in a whirlpool." We couldn't reach the control tower at all. The cloud walls kept shrinking, twisting together like a whirlpool. I couldn't even tell how much fuel we had left because the panel in front of me wasn't working anymore. All the dials were spinning back and forth for no reason. I felt like I couldn't even feel my own body, and then everything went silent. I thought I was dead. But when I opened my eyes, I saw gray fog in front of me. Once the plane came out of the tunnel, I felt weightless for a few seconds. I let out a huge sigh of relief. I looked at the panel and it was back to normal. The dials had stopped moving like crazy. The first thing I did was call the control tower to figure out where we were and tell them what had happened. The controller said the plane was invisible to the radar. He said it hadn't shown up for a while. He gave me a location where the plane was visible, and when I checked, I realized it was the exact spot where we first entered the cloud at 3,000 meters. I asked, "Where are we now?" He replied, "You're in Miami's sky." I looked at my watch, and about 47 minutes had passed since we took off. This flight usually takes an hour and a half, so how did it only take half that time? It didn't make any sense, logically or physically. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I asked my dad, "How long has it been since we took off?" He said, "About 45 minutes, but how?" My friend confirmed the time too. This plane can only go up to 290 kilometers per hour, and with a quick calculation it was clear this should have been impossible. I thought maybe our watches were messed up or something was wrong with me, like maybe I was dreaming. But when the fog cleared and I saw the clear blue sky of Miami, I realized the tower controller had been right. My friend said, "Bruce, why don't you check the fuel? That might give us some answers." I checked, and to my surprise, the plane hadn't used its usual amount of fuel. That's when my mind couldn't make sense of it. Why did we get to Miami in half the time we normally did? And why wasn't the fuel used up like it usually was? I was an experienced pilot with over 600 flight hours, and I knew this route well. I'd flown it countless times before. But neither I nor my dad or my friend could figure out what had just happened. My dad whispered, "We passed through the Bermuda Triangle, didn't we?" I said, "Yeah, we did, but we made it out alive, right?" I shook my head. "Is that why?" I knew it had to be connected somehow. When I got off the plane, I felt like I was about to throw up. I did, and so did my dad and my friend. We all had some serious physical issues afterward. I had bad headaches for months, and when I went to see a neurologist and got a CT scan and an MRI of my brain, the doctors said there was nothing wrong with me. I started researching what happened and talked to a lot of scientists about it. What really amazed me was that I found everything seemed to be connected to that electric mist and the crazy lightning. Some people even theorized that dark energy might have been the cause of the whole event. Yeah, dark energy, the same stuff that some scientists believe created the universe. Apparently, this energy can mess with time and space, kind of like a black hole. It's like I accidentally flew into a black hole and got lucky enough to escape. And that's how I ended up in Miami so quickly. But dark energy is still just a theory to explain something we don't really understand. There's no clear answer to how I traveled that distance in such a short time. You might think I'm crazy or something, but I still dream about that night, even after all these years. I'm scared of what happened, but at the same time, I want to travel through time and space again. When I told scientists and astrologists about what I experienced, they analyzed everything that happened that day, and what they discovered might blow your mind. Archive records show that on that day, 84 sunspots were observed, along with a strong solar wind traveling at around 700 kilometers per second. This caused disruptions in the Earth's magnetic field, which can mess with the instruments and radars on airplanes. So, it seems like my theory about being in an electronic mist is probably right. And those weird clouds I saw? Turns out they're actually pretty common in that region. Areas with low and high pressure keep colliding, and that clash creates storm clouds, which could have caused that massive phenomenon I witnessed. I still can't figure out what happened with my memories, though. When I was in that cloud, I saw my entire life flash before my eyes, like a movie. I saw everything so clearly, like when I was born in my mom's arms, when I took my first steps, even my first day of school. Now I barely even remember that day, but in that moment, it all came back to me in vivid detail. I'm afraid to say it, but I honestly feel like I died and came back to life. My dad and my friend didn't experience what I did, so it's hard to explain. I just can't find the words for it. When I got home, I remember my wife hugging me tightly. I called her and told her everything I'd gone through. She baked me a cake, trying to make me feel better and forget about what happened, but I was still in shock. Like I said before, I was dealing with some crazy headaches too. We celebrated my survival, but every time I went out, friends and family kept asking about my experience. It got to the point where I was just so tired of telling the same story over and over again. So I decided to write a book and share what happened to me, what I saw in the Bermuda Triangle. I called my book The Fog because, well, everything happened in that fog. And all the money I made from the book, I donated it to charity. I've had a lot of interviews after that, and I've gotten answers to many of my questions. Some scientists believe I've traveled through both time and space, and what I saw during that moment, going from my childhood to adulthood, seems like proof that I did. It felt like I was living those moments all over again. Sometimes, I feel like time doesn't really exist at all, and if we had the right tools, I could shift through it, like the Bermuda Triangle, for example. I've even started to believe that we can travel places too. How else could I have ended up in Miami in half the time it should have taken? And how could I remember moments from when I was just a 1 or 2 month old baby? All of this makes me think that we really can shift through time and space. I know some people might disagree, but I'm convinced that one day the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle will be solved. The real question is whether it will bring back all those lost vessels and planes. You know, sometimes I wonder if the people who vanished in the Bermuda Triangle didn't really die, but actually shifted to another dimension, time, or place. Who can say for sure that they're all dead? After all, no one's ever found their bodies or their vehicles. Anyway, I just want to thank my dear grandson for writing down everything I've shared and passing it on to you all. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have in the comments.